Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 92. So tonight we are going to talk about awakening, what's my new normal? And the first thing I want to say is that remember that you can use multiple words. I'm using awakening. We're going to talk about this in terms of awakening, but awakening is just another word for change or growth or discomfort. And what I'm going to talk about tonight, and what we talk about pretty frequently, I think, on the show, is this idea that change is constant. And so the first thing I want to say is that every single person who has been on Earth for the last 2 years has experienced a huge shift because we lived through and are still living through a global pandemic. And what I hear a lot of people say is something to the effect of, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. And the problem with that statement is right there in the statement, go back to normal. So we talk all the time about how presence is the most important thing in our spiritual journey. Being present, being in the present moment. So anytime you're talking about going back to something, that thing no longer exists. When people say they have all this nostalgia for the way things used to be, first of all, they're usually looking at it through a pretty rosy lens and kind of, when people say like, I want to live in the 50s, like, yeah, we had segregation in the 50s. Like there is never a time when going backwards, when living in the past is going to serve you. There just isn't. Now, that doesn't mean we don't look at the past, we don't learn from the past, we don't process traumas that have come up in the past and release those. We have to be aware of our past because a lot of us are carrying the past with us. But just like being too far into the future just kind of promotes worry, trying to recreate something that no longer exists does not serve us. So when you say, I want to go back to normal, that normal no longer exists. And the word normal, I mean, what is normal? Normal is different for everyone. Normal is what you make it. Normal is what feels comfortable for you. And so that's the other problem with that statement. The first part is go back. That implies that you're living in the past. And then the second part of the statement, the second problem with that statement is this idea of too normal. And a lot of times what we're talking about is getting back to a comfort zone, getting back to a place where we feel safe, where we feel comfortable. And of course we want to feel safe. Everybody deserves to feel safe. But if you are growing, if you are evolving, if you are awakening, a lot of times you're going to feel discomfort. You're going to feel fear because you are changing, because you are evolving. So I want to introduce this idea tonight about talking about the new normal. We're not going back to normal. We're creating a new normal. And in fact, our normal is really going to be based on this idea that change is a constant. And that's hard for us. It's hard for us to grasp. So there's a couple of things. This is one of those topics that I'm really excited about and I could talk about for a really long time. So I'm going to try to kind of keep myself reined in and talk about the main points of this. But the first thing I want to talk about is I saw this TikTok, and I usually try to, when I see something on social media, I usually try to credit the person, and I don't remember who it was. Kind of the nature of TikTok is that the videos just kind of come up. But this person was talking about this awakening, about spiritual awakening. And she was talking about kind of going from this physical plane, this three-dimensional living, to a multi-dimensional, what a lot of people call 5D. And if that speaks to you, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that for my own journey. But essentially, she's also talking about going from the old normal to the quote-unquote to the new normal. And I'm going to keep using that word normal. I already told you my problem with that word, but we'll get into that a little bit more as well. So what she was talking about, the analogy she used, I really liked to a point, and then she kind of went into some fear-mongering that I didn't really resonate with. But she was talking about how essentially there's two trains. and they're on parallel tracks. And she was talking about one of them as the 3D and one of them as the 5D. But I'm going to expand that idea into this idea of one of them is the old normal, your old comfort zones, the way that you used to live. And the other one is the new normal, this idea that you're constantly changing and constantly evolving and that you're awakening. And so these trains are kind of going down this parallel track, but eventually they're going to diverge, and you might not even be aware that the other train is even there. But while they're kind of going, while you're in this process of awakening, in this process of change, you can see both trains, and in fact you can actually jump back and forth between the trains. And that's kind of how this works. When we're in a period of change or awakening, we have these peak experiences and we jumped to this kind of new expanded normal. And then a lot of times we get scared and we jump back to our old ways of thinking, our old ways of being, our other train. And I had some experiences of this over the last couple weeks that got me thinking about this whole idea of the new normal and this idea that if you've ever watched a movie where there's some sort of a train scene, one of those like a James Bond, a lot of action movies have this, where, you know, there's some guy and he's running along the train and he's jumping, or they're like, the idea of jumping from train to train is very disconcerting, to say the least. And so I had this experience this week. I've talked a lot in the last few weeks about my experience doing my first sound bath. And that was what I would call, what some people call a peak experience. It was a huge jump onto this new train. And it was amazing and exciting and expansive, but it also scared me. And we talked about that over the last couple weeks. I'm not going to get back into that, other than to say that I felt like I was on this new train. And it felt very foreign to me. It didn't look like my old train. You know, I was having a hard time getting my bearings. But then what happened is that I had an experience this weekend where I went to an event with my husband and my dog. And it was this little pet parade. We actually didn't even make it to the pet parade, but there was a lot of dogs around, and it was kind of an old school event. It was a pre-pandemic style event where there was a lot of people. It was outside, but there were a lot of people milling around, and we kind of ran into some people that we knew that we hadn't seen for a long time. And I had this really strange experience of kind of looking at my old train, or maybe getting even kind of pulled into my old train, and I looked around and my old train looked completely foreign to me. I actually had this experience of, I described it to my friend as the people seemed almost like paper dolls. It seemed like it was in 2D. It seemed like I was in a cartoon. Things did not feel real to me. Things did not feel vivid to me. It felt kind of wrong. And I couldn't really figure out why, and it was a little bit strange, and so I thought about it for a while, and then when I saw that thing about the two trains, I was like, something kind of clicked in my head, and it was like, oh, okay. So I was on my new normal train. I was on my 5D train, my multidimensional train, whatever word you want to use for it, my awakening train. And then I kind of saw my pre-awakening train, my old normal, my 3D, whatever. And so I jumped back over to it, or maybe got pulled back over to it a little bit, because I didn't really realize it wasn't an intentional move. And I realized that it no longer felt comfortable to me. My old comfort zone is no longer comfortable to me because I have been so far outside of it for so long, and I've had these expansive experiences that going back into my quote-unquote old normal felt very empty. It reminded me of the movie Pleasantville. I felt like I was in color and everything else was in black and white. And I was like, what is happening here? And I fully recognized it has nothing to do with the event or the people that were there. It had to do with me. It had to do with my perception, where I was coming from. And what I realized is, I don't want to go back to that old train. I want to stay on the new train. I'm on this awakening train and I am following it. And when it diverges, I am going with it. But then that kind of brought up some stuff about, well, but what, how do I interact with say, people from my old life, or this kind of situation that felt like it came from sort of an older version of myself. And so I got a little bit like flummoxed, and we're going to come back to that because I'm going to talk about how to get out of this, or how to live in this in a more comfortable way, because I was getting kind of uncomfortable with the whole thing, and I was like, what is happening, and why was that such a strange experience, and does that mean I can never do quote unquote normal things because I always have to be in service, because I stepped really deeply into service through that first sound bath. And then on Sunday I had my second sound bath, and so I was really excited about it. I had different people there that were not at the first one. It was actually at a different location. And I was a little bit trepidatious because I had such a deep experience of the first one. I had such a profound shift that it scared me. And I was a little bit like, if this happens every time, like, who am I going to be? And then I actually got a little disappointed because I didn't feel quite so expanded. And I realized it's not because I wasn't expanded, it was because I've already created space for my expansion. And I'm holding this expansion in a much more comfortable way than I did at the first sound bath, because I made this shift, because I stepped fully onto my awakening train and I'm in it now. I have more space, so that when I have these peak experiences, instead of feeling like I've kind of been pulled outside of myself, I just made more space for these experiences to be held in my energetic field. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because I recognize this might sound really kind of out there and maybe not completely relatable. So the last thing I want to say to kind of give an example of this is that, because a lot of times all this stuff sort of percolating in my head. And then it takes me a little while to start integrating it. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, this happened. And then I had this awareness, and I can kind of see the pattern and how I got to where I am. So I had a client here yesterday, and she was doing an expansion ceremony for dimensional frequency expansion, which is when I call the frequency in for you to hold in a permanent way. And she's already done her emerald, so she was doing the amethyst expansion ceremony, and we were talking about it. The amethyst is a mind opener. It's a mind disruptor. It's going to kind of vibrate a lot of old beliefs away so that you can release them. And so we were talking about how it can be a little bit intense, because this energy comes in and it's like bouncing around, and what do I do with this? And so I've used this analogy on the show before, but I like it because it's very concrete. So if you think about, if you're sitting in a small closet and you throw a bouncy ball at the wall that's, 18 inches in front of you, it's going to go crazy, right? It's going to bounce back and forth between the two walls, like, like all this bouncing. And that is what calling in new energy, that is what change feels like. Change is having new energy come into your system. So whenever you have change, new energy comes into your system. And so if your system is contracted, if you are sitting in a closet, the bouncy ball of change of that energy is going to feel really uncomfortable. It's going to be bouncing around. It's going to give you this feeling of anxiety. But if you are in a stadium and you throw a bouncy ball, it's going to take like 30 or 45 seconds to get all the way to the other side, and that long to bounce back. And in fact, it might bounce once or twice and then kind of lose its momentum because there's so much space for the bouncy ball to move around in. So when we can expand our stadium, when we can expand the space that we're holding energetically, when change comes in as that bouncy ball, instead of it bouncing back and forth and kind of giving us anxiety because we're in this contracted state, the more that we expand, the more space that energy has to move around in. And I realized as I was talking to my client about this, that is exactly what happened to me with the sound bath. I did the first sound bath, and this huge amount of energy came in, and I had this huge expansion, but it was not yet my new normal. it was much more expanded than my old normal, which was a little bit more contracted. So it was a little bit disconcerting because all of a sudden I went from my closet into the stadium. And I talked a little bit about that, about how quiet my mind was and how kind of out of my ego I felt, how I was not in fear, which in fact brought up fear, which is kind of funny and ironic, but that's kind of the way this work works, the way it goes. And so when I went to do the second sound bath, because I embraced that expansion, I am still in a stadium. So when I call in more change in the form of sound, we talk all the time about how much I love sound and how much change it causes, how it moves energy without us even necessarily trying to or realizing it. When I moved all this energy in the second sound bath, I had so much space. I had a stadium worth of space for things to bounce around in. And so it felt, again, I almost got disappointed because I was expecting this huge expansion, but what I realized was I didn't need to expand because I was already in this huge expanded space when I started. I'm on my train, my awakening train, and my awakening train has 50 more cars than my old train did. So I have all this room to expand and fill out my space. And so what I would like to say about this whole idea of normalcy and the new normal is that, first of all, change is normal. Whether we like it or not, change is going to happen over and over and over. The only constant is change. That's one of those cliches that you might roll your eyes at, but it's true. And so when we can make space for change, it feels a lot less uncomfortable. When change comes in the form of that bouncy ball, and we're in this tiny little, we're in this tiny little space. In my book, I talk about this, and I use a house analogy. I like to use house analogies. We're going to use a ton of analogies tonight because I'm trying to make this seem a little bit more concrete than it may seem, especially when I'm talking about energy. And I think it's going to help us when we get into the meditation. So in my book, I talk about being in a house. And I talk about how most people, they have this big, beautiful house. They have a basement, they have 3 floors, and they have an attic. And most people are stuck in the attic of their house. They're living in the mind space. And it's a small space. And so things are bouncing around, bouncing around, bouncing around. And that's why we have all this kind of fear and ego, monkey mind, all these old beliefs that kind of bounce around. And most of us don't even realize that there's all this space down below us because we're kind of in that mental space. We're in a society that values being in the mental space. And so the first thing we can do to create more space in our physical body is to recognize we have a whole physical body. So the attic is like your mind space, but here I've got a 3rd floor in my chest and upper back, and I've got a 2nd floor in my beautiful solar plexus and sacral cave area, and then I've got my 1st floor, which is my hips and my pelvis, and then I've got this basement of my legs that in fact can connect with that beautiful earth that supports my house, the foundation of my house. And so all of a sudden, instead of being trapped in this tiny little attic like I'm in a V.C. Andrews novel, I've got the whole run of this beautiful house. And then once I come into my body, I realize I'm not just a physical body. I am energy. And so I've got my etheric body. I've got my auric body. I've got all of this infinite amount of space that I can expand into, so that when change comes in the form of that bouncy ball, instead of bouncing around in my mental space and messing with me and kind of stirring up all the dust in my attic, as it were, it's like got 3 floors in a basement, and it's got the stadium. It's got, I'm in an English manor, and I've got gardens, and I've got a forest, and there's so much space. But nobody teaches us how to think about it in those terms. Nobody teaches us how to get out of our mind space. I mean, we're starting to. That is one of the reasons I love meditation. That is one of the reasons I talk about being present. That is all of the work that I do is to help you create that space for change, because you're not going to get rid of the change. Every single person on earth just went through a huge change, whether they admit it to themselves or not. And so going back to normal is not going to serve us. We're not going to get there because that no longer exists. We are in a different present now. We are in a timeline in which we all lived through this global event that came to awaken us. This was part of this awakening. It came to bring a reckoning for people to look at their lives and say, is this how I want to live the way that I was living before? And for some people, the answer is probably like, yeah, things were great before, and I do want to kind of go back to that. But again, there's no going back. There's only being in the present, and the present creates the future. So if we are in the present and we create space for a spacious future, when these changes come in that we have no control over, instead of feeling like we're trapped and we're uncomfortable and we want to go back to something that no longer exists, we have the opportunity to jump on this awakening train and create space for ourselves, create space for the new normal, which is change. Change is my new normal. I create space for change, and that is my new normal. And that is what will allow me to continue to evolve and grow and expand, so that when I have one of those peak experiences that stretches my space, that's what a peak experience does. That's what a religious or a spiritual or a growth experience does, whatever word you want to use for that. It stretches your space, sometimes beyond the capacity you thought you could stretch. That is what happened to me in that first sound bath. I didn't realize I could be that immense and maintain that. But then it was like, which train am I on? And this new train looks so weird and I'm not sure I like it. But then I went back to the old train and it felt even weirder. And so I create the space to allow for that weirdness, to allow for that change, which is weirdness. Another word, change is always weird. Change is always uncomfortable. But if we create space to allow for that, it's actually a lot less uncomfortable. And so that is what we are going to focus on in our meditation tonight. And I think what we're going to do is what I kind of talked about in terms of my book. So if you're trapped in your mind, if you're trapped in the attic, that's a tiny space for the bouncy ball of change to be bouncing around in. Like, no wonder you're stressed out. No wonder you're overwhelmed. No wonder you feel like you don't have it all together. Because there's just not enough space to even explore anything. So we're going to come into our body. We do that every week. But most of us do not spend a lot of time coming into the body. We are practicing this every week. We've been doing this for almost 2 years now. So hopefully you are getting more comfortable with that. And the goal of this is to do this in meditation so that we can carry it forward. I did that sound bath and I walked out of it in a different state. I stayed in that state. That is kind of the goal of meditation, is to allow you to expand in your own everyday life. As well as, we meditate for meditation itself to bring calmness and to bring a sense of ease. But really it's so that when we go back out into the world, we carry all of that with us. So we're going to come fully into the body. And then we're going to work on that expansion. And we've done that before, where we kind of come beyond our physical body. We start to feel out into the space that we're in right now. We start to feel out beyond the physical confines of the space that we're sitting in and into whatever lies beyond the room that we're in, the neighborhood that we're in, the city, the world, the universe. It really is limitless how much we can expand. And then we're going to fill that space with divine light and love. Because that is what expansion is touching that energy, calling that energy, and recognizing that we are all one and that we are that divine light and love. And that's another way to be able to sit in this constant change, is having the constant knowing that you are a divine being who is being taken care of, that you are loved, that you are love. And so anything that happens to you is kind of trivial compared to that anchoring of being in your body, that expansion of being connected to that love and light that is all around us when we can see it. Change won't rock our boat as much when we're anchored, when we're in this big space. When the bouncy ball comes into the stadium, you might not even notice it at first because you're in this huge stadium. So let's meditate together. So if you'd like for this meditation, you might sit up so that you can stay alert, so that you can stay in flow without falling asleep, but trust your intuition, trust your body. And for the first few moments here, notice where your awareness is. It's probably in your head. It's probably somewhere from the chin up, in your mind, in your thoughts, thinking about the day earlier, thinking about what I just said, thinking about what happens later tonight. So just notice that. Just recognize it. And then start to become aware of the fact that you have a body below your head. And in fact, some parts of that body might even feel some discomfort or some pain. Sometimes that's the body's way of telling us to pay attention to it because we've been in our head for so long, we've lost connection to the body. And as you take your next breath in, let yourself sigh it out. You can use that audible ha sound to bring yourself into that ease response or not, whatever feels good to you tonight. Take 2 or 3 nice deep breaths in whatever way feels good. And then on your next inhalation, allow that crown chakra, the top of your head, to open and invite that beautiful, loving golden light to flow in through your head, into your neck and throat, and really feel your neck and throat here. Really feel this area that's below your head. Let your awareness come into the neck and throat. And as you inhale, draw that beautiful awareness, that light, that love into the shoulders and the upper back. Become aware of that part of your body. Let that beautiful light flow down into your upper arms. And again, let your awareness follow the light here. Let it come into your elbows and your forearms, your wrists and hands. Allow this beautiful light and love, this conscious awareness to flow into your chest and upper back. Really feel into your chest. It might be really tight. Take a couple of deep breaths into the chest, into the upper back. As you exhale, give yourself permission to let go of anything that's no longer serving you in this area. And then allow that energy to flow into your belly, into that mid-back. Really feel this. Feel into your belly. A lot of times we're afraid of our belly. We've judged our belly for so long that we've made it separate from who we are. So feel into your belly tonight. Let yourself come fully into the belly. Upper belly, low back, that cave of the solar plexus and your sacral chakra. Feel into the belly. Feel what it's like to let your awareness come out of your head and all the way down into the low belly. Take a nice deep breath into the low belly, and as you sigh it out, give yourself permission to let go of anything in this area that's no longer serving you. And then let your awareness, let this beautiful light, this unconditional love flow down into your hips and your pelvis. This is another area that gets really tight, that we get very disconnected from. So take a nice deep breath with awareness into your pelvis and then sigh it out. Let go of anything you're holding in that area that's no longer serving you. And then allow that awareness, allow that light and love to flow down into your thighs, your upper legs. Sometimes it's hard to make that leap out of the torso, the pelvis and hips, and down into the legs. So take a few moments here. You can even use your hands to kind of brush them down your legs. Bring your awareness into your legs here. Fully down into the thighs, the upper legs. And then into the knees. Take a nice deep breath into the knees, sending that light and love into the knees. Sighing it out, letting go of anything you've been carrying in the knees that's no longer serving you. Really allow your awareness to be in your knees now, and then let that light, let that awareness slide down the lower legs, through your shins, through your calves, all the way to your ankles and feet. Take a nice big deep breath with that awareness in the feet. Feel your feet against whatever surface they're on. And as you exhale, let go of anything that's no longer serving you in any part of your body. Try to feel the entirety of your body here. And if you can't, that's okay. You can come back to this as many times as you'd like. But if you can, notice all the parts of your body. Notice how much more space there is than when you started out focused in your head. So much more space for energy to expand here. And then start to be aware of the space around your body. Just a few inches around your body. This is what we call the etheric body. This energy is generated by your heart. This is a loving protection, and it sometimes gets really tight. So imagine this energy coming out from your body a few inches. You can even take your hands and kind of start to pull from the edge of your skin out like taffy. You don't have to contact the body, but just very slowly stretching, and you might start to become aware that you can actually feel the energy here. And if you can't, that's okay. This takes practice. But perhaps you're pulling this taffy. Go slow with this. Energy likes to move slowly. We don't want to jar anything. We want this to feel relaxing. We want this to be slow. And then take a few deep breaths and notice how much more space there is now around your body. Coming out of the head, coming into the body, coming into the space around the body. And then as you're ready, if you feel comfortable, you can begin to expand that energy even further out away from your body, maybe an arm's length, maybe to the edge of the space you're in. If you're sitting in a room, you can try to feel out with your energy to the walls of the space you're in. And you'll know, because you'll get a little pushback. When your energy gets to a solid object, you'll get a little bit of pushback from the energy of that object. And don't try to push past that just yet. Just feel your boundaries and notice how much more space there is even in the room that you're in when you expand in this way. So much more space to hold this change, to hold this energy. Change is energy. And as it comes in and bounces around, it can make us feel really uncomfortable. So as we expand into this space, there's more space for the energy to move. It's not bouncing in the tight quarters of just our mind space. It's got all this room to spread out, to diffuse. And the next part of this is up to you. You can stay where you are. If you're comfortable and you'd like to expand further, you can expand out beyond the room you're in, into the rest of the space. You can expand out into the neighborhood you're in, or the city or town. You can expand out to the edge of the country that you're in. You can expand out to the edge of the earth itself, to the edge of the atmosphere. out into space. There is no limit here, but stay within what feels comfortable or just mildly uncomfortable. You might push your comfort zone a little bit, but it's not going to serve you if you start getting into fear. So if you start feeling some fear with this, just pull yourself back in a little bit and notice how much space there is. Even coming out of the mind into the body created so much space. Coming out past the edge of the body just a few inches created even more space. That might be enough space for you tonight, or today, or this morning. Let yourself feel spacious wherever you end up. And explore that space a little bit. Explore the feeling of how your emotions move in the body. Maybe you came into this feeling a little tight or worried. And there's so much more space for that emotion. It might just dissipate when we get expanded enough. Sometimes those emotions just float off. They get expanded out so far that we can finally let them go. And as we get into the sound portion here, begin to draw in that golden light, that unconditional love through the crown, through the heart space, down through the body, and then let it spread. Let it spread out like the rays of the sun into the rest of this space you're occupying, so that you're sitting in the middle of a beautiful ball of light, of golden light and love. Maybe you see another color, that's fine too. Bathe in this light, feel this light as we do a little bit of sound. Let yourself expand to your capacity now for the last few moments here. And as you're ready, very slowly begin to bring yourself back. You can allow the feeling of that expansion. You can allow yourself to continue to fill that space. But bring your awareness back to the body. Staying fully present in the entire body. Letting your consciousness come back. Letting your thoughts resume. If they stopped, they may not have, but stay present in your entire body. As you come fully out of the meditation, give yourself permission to stay fully grounded and connected to the earth, fully present in that entire beautiful house of your body, not just the attic. Take a nice deep breath, sigh it out. And affirm with me out loud if possible, I am fully present in my body. I am fully present in my body, and yet I am expanded and spacious. I am fully present in my body, and my new normal is to create space for change. I embrace change. Begin to slowly move your body, wiggling your fingers and toes, maybe moving your head around, shrugging your shoulders. Satnam. The truth of your identity is that you are as spacious as you allow yourself to be. And when you make space for change, that growth feels so much less scary. Take one more nice deep breath, sigh it out, and as you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thank you for taking some time to create space in your own body, in your own energetic fields. You deserve that space. You can't stop change, but you can make space to hold it in a more joyful way. Have a beautiful rest of your evening and week, and I will see you next week for Wind Down Wednesday.